Professor of Ecology Tom Oliver talked about our tendency to monetize everything, the inherent, invisible, insidious tendency to materialize everything is leading to our destruction. In our conversation on Under the Skin, we talked about this.
In ecology and environmental science, there's a new paradigm for how we should save the world, and it's a little bit scary because the old paradigm was that we should explain, share with people the wonder and the beauty of the world. Save the whale, save the panda. Here's this this beautiful tiger, and let's give some money to save it.
The old technique then was kind of totemic. You'd look at a tiger, you'd think, my God, the tiger is like a piece of art. It's like it's some representation of the divine. The polar bear, look at it there, floating about in that bit of ice. Isn't it gorgeous? We've got to keep it. Did that system work? No. What's the new system?
The new conservationists would say, well, it didn't work. We're not meeting our targets. Species are still declining around the world. So their idea is we should monetize the value of these things. So we should, we call it natural capital. And so, this is the paradigm of natural capitalism, I guess.
Natural capitalism is a terrifying idea, isn't it? To further augment capitalism as an ideology that has no alternative, that's literally natural, that's literally the metric via which we should interpret the value of the objects in the world. For me, that sounds like it will do more harm than it solves.
You don't just value that bee because it's beautiful, even though they are beautiful buzzing around us.
See that bee? Get you £3.50 of that bee.
But actually you say, well, it provides this much money of pollination and of our crops, and you give the hard figures.
Of course, to which Bill Hicks would say,
quit putting a goddamn dollar sign on every fucking thing on this planet.
And then you can, push back against, the big farming lobbies, and protecting rainforests. You don't just say it's full of beautiful creatures. You say, well, this rainforest provides water purification.
I suppose maybe you need different ways of narrativizing the planet and the necessary for consciousness around the environment. But for me, there's something quite worrying about turning into monetary units the biosphere herself. It seems like a capitulation to the dominant financial ideology. I like this example about kids in childcare.
So there's a famous study about kids in childcare in America where the parents were picking them up late. So they said, okay, well, let's fine the parents, thinking that would make them come a bit earlier. But actually, because the parents were now paying money and could be a little bit late, they actually got later. So, because they just thought, well, I can afford it, so I'll pay it.
Terrifying, really, isn't it? That there seems to be something so sort of simple and ideologically efficient about monetization and capitalism that we will kowtow to it in an instance. Yeah, that's how people talk. They go kowtow to it. What's wrong with that, Jen? That's a good way of talking. So yeah, while it's interesting to see that the trend is towards further and further objectification, I'm more and more interested in how the shadow of dominant ideologies is emerging, i.e. capitalism, Trumpism, the alternative, indistinguishable in my opinion, though it ultimately is to Trump, at least in terms of contemporary American politics. All these things create a shadow. In the current paradigm, because there is so much negativity, the alternatives start to seem more and more appealing, i.e., we've got nothing left to lose.
And the even worse thing is they then changed the rule again and took away the fine because they realized it didn't work. And it didn't go back to being the way it was. They were still later. So it undermined that social norm, doing it for the right reason as opposed to just doing it for money.
You got to do things for the right reasons. You can't start expecting schools to babysit your children. I suppose in a sense what Tom Oliver is describing there is an indication of how unconscious we have become in the ordinary details and the macro accounts of our reality. We are unaware that we are consuming the very thing that sustains us, i.e. the planet and the planet's resources. Furthermore, that when it comes to even the education of our own children, we are unaware of what to do. I feel like we have been pinioned somehow into a psychological space that prevents us from realizing who we actually are. We've been placed on rails by our conditioning. This is a time that requires great awakening. Thankfully, Tom Oliver and teachers of his ilk are providing a pathway out of the darkness. If you want to hear more from Tom Oliver, subscribe to Under the Skin from Luminary. It's a Luminary original podcast. You can get it for as little as $2.99 per month. Thanks.